how we can make dog training feel effortless. It's all to do with trying our hardest to present things in a way that we feel like everything flows. I wanted to share with you a little bit more of an insight into my experience. I feel like when I train my dogs or I'm doing some dog training, that it does feel effortless to me. And I've looked into it a lot. I'm talking about it felt effortless. Once I'd found a better way to do it anyway, it started to feel effortless. So I'm talking about the first year with my very first police dog. That is 21 years ago. So a long time ago with my then first police dog, I used to go out and I'd say, I'll just be 20 minutes, half an hour, and then I'll be back. 2 hours later, I would roll in and he's like, I thought you were only going to be half an hour. And I'm like, where did the time go? It felt like maybe half an hour, 2 hours easily. And I would easily do that. Now, that was back then. I've never really felt any differently about when I do things with the dogs. I always feel like the time just goes by really quickly. I've subsequently learned that that is something, when you do something and time just flies by and you don't really notice, because what you're doing, you're enjoying so much that you don't notice the time go by at all. And it's something called flow state. Now, a lot of you might have heard of it. A lot of you might know a lot about it. There's been a lot of studies on it. I've spoken about it in the past. There's a guy who does a really good talk on this, Stephen Kotler. It's really, really good. Have a look at that when you get a chance. I found it fascinating personally. But when I was listening to it, I had to listen to it again. And I've actually listened to it a number of times because it totally relates to back in those days when I was training with my own very first police dog solo. Anytime I did any training with them, it just felt really effortless. Time went past really quickly. So the Stephen Kotler talk, it talks about athletes that do sports that are like X Games sports, like snowboarders that do freestyle, like surfers that do the biggest waves, skateboarders, BMXers, these sorts of kind of different types of sports. And they were breaking the barriers on what they previously thought was possible. They tended to fit a particular demographic. And that demographic was that they didn't have like high-end equipment. They didn't have the best coaches. They pretty much just used what they had and just tried stuff. And he followed these sports people around for quite a long time. And he was trying to like suss out what were the common things that all of them did that made what seemed previously impossible. They made it look easy. And they were like, well, that's possible. In fact, I think we can do better than that even. And they used to really push the boundaries. When I heard that talk, I was like, this is in some ways what I was experiencing with dog training. I'm not saying I'm like pushing world boundaries or anything like that, but definitely when I was training and when I do things with the dogs, I do feel like everything disappears and it does feel really kind of effortless and time does go by really quickly. What it led me to do was look a little bit deeper about what flow state really was and how you can get into flow state. He also talks about that flow state isn't just for athletes. It's for absolutely everyone in every walk of life, whatever it is you're doing. You could be a writer, you could be a musician, you could be someone learning a new language, you could be a dog owner training your dog. It could be absolutely anything, any kind of craft, any kind of art, music, musicians. It just takes you into a completely different place. Singing, dancing, all these things, right? I think all of us can relate to this. We maybe all have something where it's like a bit of escapism for whatever hobby it is that they have. But it is about this phenomenon called flow state, right? So when I was doing a little bit more digging, I found there were 4 things needed to be in place for anyone to get into flow state, if you like. So I'm going to share my screen for a minute ago. Okay, so flow state and the 4 Fs. These 4 Fs need to be present for anyone to really get fully into a flow state, if you like. So the 4 Fs are making sure that you're only focusing on one thing, just one thing, not several things at once, because when you do that, Your attention goes everywhere. There's been studies done on this, actually, that when you hop from one task to another, you lose around about 15% of the actual time for the brain to kind of realign. So when you talk about multitasking, it's probably just about the least efficient way to do anything, right? It's a bit of a fallacy that the more you do, the more you achieve. Actually, the less you do, the more you achieve. This is a good example of that. That's like anything, dog training included. The freedom to make mistakes. These surfers and the kind of freestyle skiers were like not afraid to make a mistake. They weren't afraid to get it wrong. And they weren't afraid to fall, get up, try again, fall, get up, try again. And that was one of the big commonalities. And actually expecting to make mistakes, because it's just part of getting better at something. The feedback loop, the third F, is some way of reviewing what you've done. So some people take video, some people will note down, some people will have someone watch them and give them feedback, but ultimately having some kind of mechanism that there is some way to review what you've done so you can spot where you can improve and where you can make some changes. Also, though, equally, it's not just about spotting the bad stuff, but it's also spotting the really good stuff. I relate this a lot to dog training because the brain does focus heavily on that negative bias. We'll go, yeah, it was good, but this could have been better, or I didn't do that very well. And we focus so heavily on the negatives that actually you need to see everything in balance. This was good. This could be a bit better. That was awful. I'll not do that again. I mean, we all do it, let's face it. And then the fourth F is the 4% challenge. And that 4% challenge is basically from whatever base level you're at, the next progression should only be 4% of a challenge beyond that. And it's just enough of a challenge that it is a challenge, but not so big a challenge that's unachievable. So it's like achievable progressions of challenge. And this is the undercurrent in everything we do on the supported courses anyway at Genius K9. This is simmering away under everything. This is what I'm looking at all the time. It's always in my mind. Now, I didn't know that when I was experiencing this, when I'm training my police dog, but when I looked at it, I was like, I can see actually what was happening. I was like never afraid to make mistakes. I was always either noting down what I'd done or at least having some sort of way to review what I'd done. I wasn't making the challenges massive. And I was also focusing on just one thing. Just to look at this in like a practical setting. What we do, we play games with the dogs to teach them how to do things and just get great foundations. But what we're doing is we are rewarding micro wins. So we are allowed to make mistakes, but we're also noticing tiny little kind of progressions. So I'm not looking for massive jumps forward. Most people who struggle with their dog's training, they're in such a rush to get to the fancy stuff that everything at the beginning, you know, all the basics fall apart because we're in such a rush. A lot of people just jump ahead too far, too fast. It's a really common problem with anyone's dog training. You do need guidance quite a lot of the time, because human nature wants to just like get to the end, right? Quick, how quickly can I get this done? It appeals to human nature, that side of like, oh, I can do it quickly, right? Quick, right? I'm in. It's very compelling. But what we can do is we can win really quickly. So we do these micro wins. We vary games so that we can celebrate the success, these little micro wins, and then we create this peak reward experience. So we're getting like a feedback loop within a feedback loop here. I know that I've done well, so I'm rewarding that. I'm not getting my knickers in a twist about making mistakes. I keep going, I keep trying. We play again, we laugh, we play another game, we celebrate the wins. We're focusing on one thing all the time. I'm looking for those small wins to create this kind of flow feeling for you when you train your dogs. That's what I'm always looking for. When you do that though with your dog, all of a sudden like things start to just go up in little tiny increments, and it really does make a difference. And that's when you get out of that kind of feeling of being stuck. But let's say your dog's learning in a way that they're progressing really well. It's not just your dog learning, right? I want to apply this to our learning as well. Apply the same sort of flow state type of feeling to what you're doing, to not just your dog, but to you as well. You start to see both You both feel like you're on that upward trajectory. And that's, to me, what flow state does. It starts to make you feel like you can win, like you can get better, like you can make progress. For me, this has existed in my dog's training all the time, basically, without knowing it. When I'm sharing any sort of training, actually, that's what I'm always trying to get you to feel as well, is like that this feels like I can win. It feels like it's achievable, that we've set the next progression just at the right level, just enough to push forward. If you don't know anything about game-based training, you'd like to learn a bit more about how it works, those little slides that I had on the screen share are part of my free training on my website, geniuscanine.com. Check that out and just learn a bit more about how it works, and to help educate so that people can understand a little bit how this can really work for you and your dog. So that's my kind of take on how we can make dog training feel effortless. It's all to do with trying our hardest to present things in a way that we feel like everything flows. Some of the most special things that have ever been discovered in the world have been found by accident, so unless you try stuff and then you put your own twist on it and you think, actually, I see it from this perspective. The way I see game-based training, I was introduced to it probably Susan Garrett, but there was a couple of 2 to 3 trainers I was following at the time that had a similar kind of approach, but from very different backgrounds. But the notion of having a game-based approach was like, bing to me, but I didn't see it the same way as those people saw it. I saw it from my own perspective, and then I saw it in a completely different way. I don't think by any means what I do is like totally perfect, but I do think there's a lot of strength in what we're doing, basically. And I think going back to how we can make dog training feel effortless, I think game-based training lends itself so well to getting into that flow state, and just in every aspect of it, it's phenomenal. I think there's so much we can learn, and there's so much we can learn. I was on a live the other day, we were talking about flow state, and someone said, oh, I'm in education of humans, and it sounds very similar. This is really interesting to me. So it just shows you that we don't just learn from animal behavior, that's part of it, but there's so much to be learned from education, and also from the most unlikely of places. There are other ways that people can learn, and sometimes you've got to look in completely different fields to see what's out there and see what's possible. It's all pretty amazing, I will say that.